optimistic way, I have to say, of thinking about it. Certainly, we've had a few days in which, you know, the parties have kind of quieted down. But do you feel that this truly will turn the page on America's vision of bin Laden, America's view of Muslims?
I believe so, yes. I believe the last 10 years have been a time in which we Muslims in America have engaged very much. I believe that American Muslims are an important player as interlocutors between America and the Muslim world. And I believe that in the last 10 years it has become increasingly evident that the approach of terrorism is not going to work. Terrorism does not build societies. Terrorism breaks down the very structures of societies. It breaks down the structures of civil society. And Muslims have been the major victims of such terrorism. From Morocco to Indonesia in the Muslim world, Al-Qaeda has been active and committed acts of terrorism. And especially in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan, I mean, people have been killed in Friday present mosques. People have been killed shopping for food for their markets. Where is this in our jurisprudence? The Quran is very specific when it says, "La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha." God will not, literally it means God does not burden the soul. No, I'm sorry, I'm quoting another verse. The verse I want to say is, "La taziru waziratu wizra ukhra." No soul will be burdened with the burden of another, which means no soul is responsible for the sin of another. I mean, and this is a fundamental Quranic commandment. So to kill innocent people who, just like that, I mean, is a complete travesty of fundamental Quranic commandment. The Quran says, as the Bible says, whoever kills one human being has killed all of humanity. Whoever saves one human soul as if he has saved all of humanity. And they kill indiscriminately. Where is this? Suicide is never condoned in the Quran or in the Hadith. There's even a story that one of the people who fought on the side of the Prophet, definitely a just war, and he was bleeding, couldn't stand the pain, he committed suicide, and the Prophet said, "This man will be in hell." There's never been a circumstance in which suicide has been acceptable. And these terrorists have not only killed themselves, they've killed indiscriminately. It has caused incredible pain. It is universally criticized in the Muslim world, from leaders to societies. And it's not working.
Yeah, the West Point Terrorism Center just released a report earlier this year that showed that 85% of all deaths by Al-Qaeda from 2002 to 2008, 85% of their victims were Muslims. And it goes to show why it is that I think bin Laden's popularity amongst Muslims has dropped precipitously over the last few years. But there is some concern now in certain quarters that a man who was irrelevant while he was alive may suddenly gain relevance in his death. Is that something that you're worried about?
Well, I mean, certainly we have to worry about that. I'm not saying that terrorism is completely dead now. I mean, it's a dynamic which continues. But you know, look at the Americans during the time of the Wild West. You know, people were firearms and shooting each other. There's certain romanticism, you know, when you're young, to Jesse James. But where does that lead you? That doesn't build a society. Society's not built that way. And what we need in the Muslim world today is to build societies. And what is inspiring me a lot is what we see in the Arab world. This whole idea of non-violent protests, Silmiya. Okay? But there's a different demand right now by the people for democracy. And democracy means a number of things. Primarily, a government, as Lincoln said, for the people. Not the people, by the people, but for the people. Not a government that treats people and treats the assets of the land as belonging to them. It's this fundamental shift which is required in the Arab Muslim world. People have wanted it for a long time. administration is finally, the American administration is getting it. Until 9/11, I don't think the American administration got it. But since then, with both the Bush administration and the Obama administration, they get the fact that American support for dictatorship has contributed to the rise of that. And the fact that young people in the Arab world could not find a future and were very angry with their regimes was part of the reason why Al-Qaeda was able to recruit. But with the current wave and the desire of democratization and a government that serves their constituents, the rationale for recruiting is certainly being pulled, being eroded right now.
I want to remind everyone in the audience that you have little 3x5 cards. Feel free to write your question on that and wave it in the air, and someone will pick it up and bring it up here, and I'll be happy to ask them. I think that you're right, that with the death of bin Laden, that perhaps a new chapter might be written about America's relationship with Islam, and I do think that there is reason to be somewhat optimistic that at the very least the face of Islam, which for many Americans has been Osama bin Laden, will be transplanted with a new face, the face of hundreds of thousands of young people demanding their dignity, their human rights.
The face of Islam.
Please don't. I don't want to be anyone's face. That said, the reality of the situation, I think, speaks for itself. Anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States is at unprecedented levels. The Washington Post says that 50% of Americans have a negative view of Islam. 30% of Americans believe that Muslims in this country should be forced to carry special IDs identifying them as Muslims. 25% of Americans, according to Newsweek, believe that Barack Obama is himself a Muslim. Now, as ridiculously high as these numbers are, they are far higher today than they were in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. How do you explain this? What's happening? Because I can say from our experience, our friendship, our relationship, we know that the American Muslim community has been working overtime over the last 10 years precisely to fight against this kind of view of Islam. 10 years later, it seems as though anti-Muslim sentiment is far higher despite our efforts. What do you think is going on? How do you explain this?
I see a number of factors. One is 9/11, which was a tremendous wound and attack against America. I mean, never was America attacked in contiguous 48 states. An attack in such a surgically effective way. Both the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, headquarters of the major superpower in the world, whose military budget is equal to the next 2 dozen countries combined. So the 9/11 was a very traumatic attack, and it was seen in the perception of the typical American as an attack from the world of Islam. So by association, that has been, I think, one factor. The other factor is, I attribute another factor to the cycle of radical ideologies, the vicious cycle of radical ideologies. You have someone like said Hook in the 60s who developed a radical ideology against the West, against the inclusion of Western culture in the Muslim world, and against the regimes like Abdel Nasser, who he believed were also oppressing religion in their respective countries. And he was the ideologue. He developed the ideology which influenced people like bin Laden and a generation of younger Muslims than he. And the counterpart to that here was, in my judgment, and I think many people share this also, was Samuel Huntington in his Clash of Civilizations Foreign Affairs article of his book, where he essentially identified Islam as the next existential enemy of Western civilization after communism. And that piece of writing influenced a lot of people in Washington, D.C. And when people begin to think that someone or some entity is their enemy, people begin to act accordingly. And then, of course, later on, the development of a very, very small but very, very effective Islamophobic machine. There is an element in America that is Islamophobic and that seeks to attack Islam.
Yeah, well, this is what I want to say is that I think you're right. All those things are important and certainly play a role in this sort of rise of anti-Muslim sentiment, except that they are much higher over the last couple of years, and especially since the election of Barack Obama. The Newsweek poll that I said to you, the 50% of Americans that have a negative view of Islam, it's an 8% jump. What I said about Barack Obama, 2 years after he was elected president, now the quarter of Americans think that he's a Muslim. That's a 12% jump from when he was elected. It's getting worse, is what I'm saying.
So Barack Obama is responsible.
Is that Obama's fault? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that there is a certain amount of residual racism in America. There is an element of society that has not been able to accept the fact that the president and the fact that his father was a Muslim sort of adds salt to their sense of injury. And I think that sentiment is part of it. But the important thing is what we do moving forward. And I believe what's important for us to engage, because statistics have also shown that the vast majority of Americans don't know about Islam.
That's right, 60% of Americans claim to have never met
Muslim. And I was just sitting with Stanley, a friend of ours, a couple of days ago before I came. And he was in Kentucky, and he met people who had never met a Muslim before. And just like, you're a Muslim? Wow, you know. Just getting to meet a Muslim is you know, and getting to know you